All right, so we're going to be rolling out our the thing that got bumped last week. We're going to be starting with today. That's our review of the new DC animated feature, Justice League: Crisis on Infinite Earths
Part 1. We're going to have a through line between these two movies.
Yeah.
And it's abrupt endings.
So you'll learn with us. We love DC animated films.
Yeah, if you don't know this,
you haven't listened.
You haven't been paying attention.
And if you have not seen DC animated shows because you think they're for kids, you need to fucking watch them.
I have a boy for you. His name is John Constantine.
Yeah.
And he will change your mind about that.
Yes. So, I gotta admit,
yeah,
not in love with the animation style in this movie.
This one, I mean, this whole universe. So, to anybody who doesn't know, DC has had these animated movies for a little over 10 years now. They had an entire universe that crescendoed with John Constantine sending the Flash to reset the universe because the entire universe was dying. And so he was like, fuck it. What have we got to lose? Then there's a transition period into this new style. And the idea is that this new style is the universe rebooted after the Flash went back and whatever he did. Which is why you have the Flash and this weird hobo who is definitely not John Constantine.
Dude. That's so it's like, dude, come on, just
very
say who he is.
He's very clearly John Constantine.
If you don't know who that is after watching this movie, then you fucking need to go back.
You weren't paying attention. No, there is a Constantine movie, Constantine in the House of Madness or something like that. And it ties both universes together. It's one of those DC showcases where you have like 4 other pretty middling stories and then one that's okay. And this is the one that's okay. It's not bad. It's about John being punished for instigating the end of the universe and, you know, basically harming the natural order of the multiverse in doing so. And that's how we know that this hobo is John Constantine, not only because his magic looks exactly like John Constantine's, but also because if you've seen that, you know that he is picked up by the Spectre at the end and kind of told, you're going to shepherd doomed worlds as your punishment for destroying this part of the multiverse. And I did like that section of this movie. I like the idea of how the storytelling is done, where it's non-linear. You're just getting kind of pieces flying by. I do think that becomes a problem by the end of the movie, though.
It does.
I think as we go, it's good. But at some point, I think right around the time where they actually meet the Monitor, I was like, I need this to be a little clearer because this feels extremely rushed and like we're only getting half the story.
I agree with you. Like the first half of this movie, I truly was grasping at what the hell was going on because it was too jumpy and too much of I'm just going to turn and all of a sudden I'm running through the time force and I'm back in this spot and you're like,
yeah,
what the fuck is going on? Like, I understand having to do this jump, but you got to make it a little bit more.
It was okay.
Cohesive.
I saw what they were doing, and so I was able to kind of follow it. But at the same time, by the end, I was like, this is not enough. This is not enough for me to kind of run on. No pun intended. I like it for like the Amazo stuff and the forming of the Justice League and the Criminal Society and all these other things. Like, I think it works in those sections. But after a certain point, like conceptually within the body of the plot, the idea is that the Flash no longer experiences time in a linear manner. And so since he's our kind of narrative audience surrogate, and we're following the story through him, we also do not experience the story in a linear narrative. Which is fine if done well, but by the end, I just felt like you're introducing so many things and you're trying to get us engaged in so many ideas. And whether they're Easter eggs or something else, it just doesn't coalesce because this entire time we've been having this story told specifically and only from Barry's perspective. And now we kind of have these moments that are outside of Barry's perspective. And you get just kind of this muddled mess where you're like, there should be more room to breathe here. We should have gotten to this point in the story 20 minutes ago.
And there were a couple times where, especially when the Supermen are working together, and I'm like, I can't remember what universe that Superman's from. And
that was a real issue. Was like I I can look and I can see, okay, that Black Canary and the Hour Man and probably one of the Wonder Women, they are from the Justice Society of America movie where the Flash goes into this parallel time, which was one of the first ones in this universe that they came out with. I can follow that. Who is this Superman that's dating Wonder Woman? Have we met him? Do we know him?
I can't.
And it was just a little too far out of reach. It was like how they kept on cutting back to Bruce and Dick and Huntress.
Yes.
And you were kind of like, man, I really want to care. But you have done no work for me to actually care about what's happening. So I want to care so badly, but I can't grasp what you're trying to tell me because I have no frame of reference. You know, have they been spending a lot of time together? Have they been getting dinners together? Because we know that this Bruce has kind of decided he is alone in his mission. We see him give up Dick for adoption, which is a great moment. I thought that was great. I love seeing those moments in a multiversal kind of story where it's like, this happened here and it doesn't happen almost anywhere else. I love that. By the end, when Robin comes over and is talking to Batman, and then Huntress comes over, and then they're having having two conversations, these stilted, who are you? You can't believe you don't remember me, Bruce. And then the world's ending, and they're like, man, I really wish we had gotten to spend more time together, and I'm really thinking about you two while the world is ending. And I'm like, what?
It was just dumb.
What's happening?
Yeah.
I want to be into this, but what is happening?
I agree.
And I got that from Jensen Ackles' performance a little bit too, which I also had an issue with.
That was another thing, man. The voice performances were not
as good as in the other universe.
Yeah.
The voice performances in the other universe are almost universally better. And that's like, they weren't consistent, but they were always better than this. And I wanted to like this so bad. I also anticipated most of this movie being the monitor section, not just the last 20 minutes of the movie being the monitor section with all this stuff jammed into it after this very touching, very well done Flash storyline, which...
Exactly. The Flash storyline, I wasn't a massive fan of until the end with him and Iris and how they built the tower stuck in the Time Force and they aged, no one else did, and that was touching.
That was good. I like that. But there were just so many moments. I like watching the crime syndicate try to punch their way out of the universe ending.
Yeah, that was good. Awesome.
But like there were just a lot of moments where I was just kind of lost, both in terms of the story they were telling, but also as somebody who's watched these movies, where I'm looking back at the Green Lantern movie where John Stewart, not that John Stewart, joins the Justice League kind of accidentally, and that's when we meet Green Arrow and Hawkgirl and all these other things, and we see Hawkgirl here, and clearly John Stewart is on the planet, and we hear about the fall of Hal Jordan, and we see Hal Jordan here before he fell, and so you get like, okay, so I can kind of see how all this works, but also... when is this happening? I still have to go back and watch Warworld again because I got to the end of Warworld and I was like, what the fuck is happening? And then
that's a good way to describe it.
And then I found out they were doing Crisis. I was like, oh, that's what's happening. And then I watched Crisis. I was like, so that's not what's happening. What is going on with Warworld? And then they reference it directly when the Flash sees the caveman Batman. I'm just like, what is going on?
Yeah, it was all over the place, man. And like you said, I desperately wanted to like this movie so bad because they've been on a little bit of a weird string lately with their quality ever since, unfortunately, the Discovery takeover.
Yeah,
we've seen
some of them I really like. I still think Man of Tomorrow is great.
That is
capital G, great.
That is great.
I want to like the Green Lantern Beware My Power. I really want to like it.
Yeah.
It doesn't coalesce in a very good way, but I really want to like it. I really want to like everything that they're trying to do, where they're trying to make these big leaps. In Beware My Power, we meet Adam Strange, except that we had already met this version of Adam Strange in that Constantine one-off. So it's like, I want to like all of this, and it's really cool, and it has a lot more structure than a lot of these encompassing, not dark universe kind of movies have. But man, this just tried to be too many things and ended up not telling a real story as a result, where you kind of like, not for nothing, we're kind of rehashing Flashpoint for a third time now, which is fine because we're doing it kind of differently, and that's okay. And I'm not saying I don't want the Flash to be your lightning rod for this whole thing. I do. Yeah. I want him to be the central character. I think that's more interesting than Batman or Superman being the central figure of the universe is the Flash, who has a very different view of everything than either of those characters. He's kind of in between both of them. Man, I got to the end of this movie and I was like, you're really banking on that other movie making this make sense, because it honestly feels like there are scenes missing from this movie that are going to have to be directly addressed. Does the next movie start with the Monitor stuff and we see them building the tower and then it just cuts all the Barry stuff and the tower's just done? Why did the wave increase in velocity all of a sudden? Yeah. All these things that we get
because they keep nothing. They keep acknowledging that they feel like the wave is being directed by somebody, and it's not just a natural occurrence. But then they don't go anywhere else.
And then the Monitor disappears, and the Thanos snap happens, and you're just like, okay, all right, we're getting a part 2, so that's fine. This doesn't feel like an ending.
No.
And also, I don't really feel like I understand what's happening. So, like, I can't even tell you who survives at the end of this movie.
Yeah, I have no fucking idea.
So, like, man, I want to like
Crime
this movie.
Syndicate, I know at least that's
they're dead.
Yeah, they're dead.
They're dead.
They're 100% dead.
But I just got to the end of this movie. I watched it again this morning because I wanted to come into it with a fresh set of eyes, and I just got to the end, and when the credits roll, you're just like, wait, what?
Yeah,
what's happening? Like, even Infinity War had the decency of showing Thanos looking out over the sunset, and you got kind of a sense of like, oh, this story is over, and the next part is the next story. This felt like we got halfway into the next story, and they were like, okay, so this is where part 1 ends. And it's like, but this isn't a good place to end part 1.
Was terrible. And, unfortunately, that's the problem with a lot of these movies, including one we're going to be talking about after this, where they want to do these part 2s and they want to do these cliffhangers. They don't necessarily do it well. Like, no. I'm not going to lie, I'm not a massive fan on how Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows ended, the first one, with Voldemort getting the wand and shooting in the air and it ends like that. You look at, like, Lord of the Ring movies.
Yeah.
That's a good way to end it.
They have an actual ending.
Exactly.
We can talk about the Faramir Law and how that changes how the second one ends, but they have actual endings to the movie. The story that you're watching, all the lines are tied off. Maybe some of them are going to continue going, but there is like a knot where you're like, okay, so this section is done, and now we're moving on to the next thing. This literally felt like they had taken a whole 3-hour movie, cut out certain sections of it, decided it was going to be 2 movies, but didn't put the sections together in a meaningful way.
I bet that's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
They made a 3-hour movie, just put a cut right at the 1.5-hour mark and said, okay.
And it just doesn't make any sense. Like, all the stuff with the Monitor, I love the conceit of, like, we're going to bring together all these really smart people. Although, again, I have questions about how Bruce Wayne can know the identity of all these people from other realities. It's fine. We're not going to get into it because we fucking don't have time. In this movie, all about time travel and being out of linear space, we don't have time to discuss how Bruce Wayne knows who all these people are, just having been in this room for, let's be generous and give him 3 hours. Yeah. It was too rushed. That scene with the 2 Supermen talking about how Diana won't die. It meant nothing.
No.
It should have meant a lot, and it meant nothing because I don't know who this Superman is.
Yeah.
He's not the one from Warworld.
No.
So who is he? Have we ever met him? Is he the one that Barry met in the past? Is he Shakespeare? Because if so, you should refer to him as Shakespeare so we know who the fuck he is.
Yeah, no, that was the part that really stood out to me.
Yeah.
And I was trying to bring it. It's like we were talking about Tenet. It's like towards the end of that movie, same as this, I was trying to bring it all together in my brain to figure out what I just watched. And it just, they didn't give you enough answers in this one.
Yeah.
And it made it really unnecessarily complicated. And I understand you want to make something that seems difficult to kind of put your arms around because it's jumping between timelines and universes and worlds and all this. But you got to make it at least somewhat tangible to gauge what's going on.
Well, and like if you took either Tarantino movie, Reservoir Dogs or Pulp Fiction, and you just cut them up even more, and made them even less linear in their timeline, that would still make sense by the end of the movie.
Yes.
Because all those lines are at least resolved in some capacity.
Each chapter is completed before you move on to the next chapter.
And even if you hadn't done it by the end of the movie, all those chapters would be closed.
Yes.
We get to the end of this movie and it's just, there's no ending.
No.
There's no satisfaction to the ending. There's no sense of like, I guess there's another adventure to have. It's more like, oh, it did work, but it didn't work, and we're not going to get any answers on why. And also, the Watcher, not the Watcher, is gone.
Yeah.
And I'm just, man, I want to like this, but guys, you're giving me nothing.
It's so frustrating.
You're making it so hard for me. Like, I can totally see myself watching this again, but that's always going to be my issue.
Which now I think we need to wait for that second part to come out and maybe watch them together.
Yeah.
And see if it does help.
Honestly, my only hope is that the second part is going to fill in the gaps of everything that was missing in this one. And then we can kind of be like, okay, if you watch this all as one unified piece. But again, that's not what you're presenting. You can't serve dinner and have made a full, Thanksgiving dinner and then say, but right now we're only serving the mashed potatoes and the corn and the cranberry sauce. And you're like, oh, is it because the rest of the stuff's not done? It's like, well, it's mostly done, but we thought that this would be a better way to present everything. And you're just like, but it's missing everything. Yeah. What am I supposed to do with this?
And you look like a narrative like The Long Halloween that they just did a two-parter. They did a much better job separating
dividing that story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what to do.
Yeah,
you're just not doing it.
It just didn't work the way I really wanted it to. Also, not for nothing, your Justice League is full of dicks.
Oh my god, like terrible.
Just all of them. They're all guys, and then you have one woman. And I'm just sitting here like, even
if S&M outfit from the 1950s.
Even if I give you Martian Manhunter as a gender non-conforming figure, even if I give you that, there's still 5 other men on this team. Give me Zatanna. Give me... Hell, I'll take Mary Marvel at this point.
Well, and they've done a better job in the past of integrating Hawkgirl.
Yeah.
Into more of these. And it's like, how about her?
Where was she?
Yeah. I don't know. It's weird. So let's hope. Let's hope for part 2.
I really hope it gets better. I really hope that it goes back and fixes the problems. Because the parts that are good, I really like.
Yeah.
It's just the parts that are disappointing are just disappointing. None of it's bad. There's just large swaths that are deeply disappointing. And you're like, oh, I like this. I like that we're talking to Amazo to try and resolve the issue. But, man, I wish that this had a better ending. And I also wish that the writing for Zachary Quinto was better.
Yeah.
Because his Lex Luthor isn't necessarily bad, but the writing for it is so bad.
The writing's bad. And I'm glad you brought up Amazo, because it's like, I wanted more of like that storyline.
And like that's such a we were talking today because Kelly was watching it with me, and she was like, oh no, this character's name is Amazo. I'm so sorry. And I'm like, here's the funny thing, Amazo shows up fucking everywhere. He's fucking everywhere. And so you always have people being like, oh, it's an Amazo, or watch out, Amazo is here, or here's my gift, an Amazo. And I'm just like, all right, I at this point I've become a nerd to it.
It's kind of like unobtainium and Avatar. You're like, oh, you couldn't think of a better name.
Well, to me, it's like it'll always ring with clarity as I was in a production of Yours, Anne, which, if anybody doesn't know, is the musical rendition of The Diary of Anne Frank. And I was assistant director for this at MCC. It was one of those things where, it was one of those things where the first time you heard the songs, you're like, oh. And the second time you heard the songs, you're like, man, these are bad. And then the 90th time you heard the songs, you were like, yeah, baby, let's go. And that's kind of Amazo for me. I'm like, yeah, it's Amazo. How's this going to go today? Is this one of those Amazos that we can talk to? Or is this one of the Amazos that just smashes?
You know, I don't know why it popped in my head, but the only thing I could think of is that they redid Knocking on Heaven's Door with Knock, Knock, Knocking on the Attic Door. And that's all, like, one of the songs I could think about for that. I don't know why.